Okay, I know this runs counter to almost everything I've been saying about this camera, but I may have to skip the A7C II or the A7CR if it doesn't have this. Now, if you've watched my channel, which I've built on the back of the Sony A7C, this sounds like heresy, and ironically, this is my third I may skip this camera video. Okay, so now that you have any number of Sony cameras to choose from, well, here's one more. Because in every previous one, I've been saying that I'm waiting, well, impatiently waiting for the A7C II, or I'm going to pre-order it as soon as Sony will let me. Because for me, that 33 megapixel sensor is perfect, and I've had and loved the A7 IV as it's at that sweet spot of resolution for a hybrid camera for photo, and in video with that downsampled 7K is as sharp as I'll ever need, and the A7C is the ideal body size for a travel camera, and I've traveled quite extensively with it. But one thing that caused me to buy the Sony ZV-E1, which has now quickly become my new go-to travel cam for video, because if you've watched my A7C travel videos where I've gone to Greece or walked around the Colosseum in Italy or weaved my way through the busy streets of London or soaked up the sun at a beach in Malibu or chilled on a lake with a family or nearly died in the desert during a heat wave, there's one thing, and let me know if you see it, but it's one major flaw that the A7C has that caused me to pick up the ZV-E1, which at least for video outperforms the A7C in almost every other way. Yet for photo, that's obviously another story. However, it's worth noting that the ZV-E1 is not as bad as most people have made it out to be in the photo department. I actually did a photo shootout comparison between the A7C and the ZV-E1 with a bunch of different lenses and really couldn't tell the difference. That's 12 megapixels versus 24, not 12 versus 33. So this is why, if you saw my post, I've been trying to sell my Sony A7C, honestly a camera that's hard to part with, in preparation for the arrival of version 2, and was planning and still might plan to also sell the ZV-E1 because I really thought that the A7C II, which will clearly be a better photography camera, not just because of the higher megapixel count, but due to the rangefinder style EVF, which I'd rather have than not, no matter the quality of it. And then on top of all that, might be almost an equally great video camera, save for the poor rolling shutter performance, no uncropped 4K 60 and no 4K 120 at all, and slightly worse dynamic range. Yet, with all the recent reporting about it from Sony Alpha rumors and the like, the one feature that keeps not getting mentioned, although this could just be an oversight, but if it's not, could be a deal breaker, is the dynamic active stabilization. Now, to be honest, I thought because the ZV-E1 had dynamic stabilization, I presumed that all Sony cameras going forward would have it. But then the A6700 came out with the same processor as the ZV-E1 and did not have it. And maybe that's because it's a crop sensor, but it got me worried. So if you notice in my A7C clips, the footage was shaky, and it has been one of the most common complaints that I get in those videos, that the stability of the footage is almost hard to watch. And I agree. So when I picked up the ZV-E1, I turned on the dynamic stabilization and I was shocked by how good it was. And it immediately became the perfect travel video camera for me. And you can see the difference between a camera with dynamic stabilization and one without. I just got active stabilization on the Sony A7C, and again dynamic on the ZV-E1. I've tried to match the colors and exposure the best I could. I have a variable ND on both of them, and I think I'm about 2 stops. I've got S Cinetone in the ZV-E1, and I've got a custom picture profile like C Cinetone in the A7C. So I'm just trying to match exposure, white balance, and It's an overcast day, and we're also using the in-body mic in the ZV-E1 and the in-body mic in the A7C. So you can not only see the difference, you can hear the difference. So which one sounds better and which one looks better to you. So again, dynamic stabilization on the Sony ZV-E1 and active stabilization on the A7C. So I'm praying and hoping that the A7C II and the A7CR will have dynamic active stabilization, because if they do, I stand by everything I've ever said in the past and will pre-order it tomorrow and likely look to sell my ZV-E1. And if not, I sadly may have to skip it. Now, what about you? Is this a deal breaker, or are you picking up this camera more for photography? And look, I get that this might be just my quirk, and honestly, who knows? Either way, I'm sure if I don't buy it, I will probably rent it to do a proper comparison. So stay tuned for that, and thank you for your time and attention. I have a bunch more videos about videos like this on the way, so consider following along and subscribing. All right, thanks guys, bye.